Due to the way things have worked in StarCraft, in Wings of Liberty, Heart of the Swarm, and it looks like it's going to continue in Legacy, in the extreme late game, there's little incentive to taking more bases than necessary to own 24 mineral nodes. 3 fully saturated bases opposed to 4 or 5 partially saturated bases. Some players, like Noni and Lelouch, have suggested this results in far fewer split map games, and far more death ball compositions than Brood War. Lelouch explains, "What differs between the games, Brood War and StarCraft, is how the curve up to the maximum is shaped. Brood War, when compared to StarCraft II, has a steeper income rate climb at lower worker counts, but then slows down once workers start bumping into each other past 1 worker per patch. Uvantech, in his analysis of worker pairing, states in a place where the theoretical base cap is of 7 or 8 instead of 4, it becomes quite clear that a player that is facing a turtler will be able to out-expand him fairly easily, and because his workers are more efficient than his 3-basing opponents, he will be able to overcome the turtle player by sheer numbers and macro." That sounds like what you were saying, Torque. But here's the further quote. "Worker pairing generates very specific issues, such as players not wanting to expand over a certain threshold, meaning that without worker pairing, players will want to take more bases and split themselves more, creating more weak points to the defense which aggressive players can take advantage of, but these scenarios will not happen when players only have 2 bases." Skipping that quote, and here's the final actual question.
So essentially what he's saying is that currently there's not enough incentive to spread yourself out and expose yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And Legacy of the Void takes a step in the right direction, but it's still not close enough to where you have the incentives to be expanding at a risk, because there's not a big enough of a reward, essentially.
Right. Basically, this lends itself to the idea, the entire fundamental concept that has permeated StarCraft. Terrible, terrible damage.
I remember that. Yeah.
It's been a StarCraft trope for a long time, but some content creators have suggested that it is also a psychological trait. People like to see huge armies fighting other huge armies with lots of blood, gore, and devastation everywhere. This, according to the proposers of this theory, has lent itself to the primacy of deathball armies throughout SC2's development, and has influenced Blizzard's decision-making from the very first day. To appeal to the lowest common denominator general population's violent sensibilities, Blizzard has reduced the overall depth of the game. Are the economic changes in LotV an attempt to address this, and if so, are they the best option to do so? I know that was a mouthful. I tried to get past the concept.
No, it was a good question. It was a nitty-gritty question. It's a good question. Telecom?
I think that, honestly, yeah, you got me stumped with these questions. Yeah, I mean, I think that, honestly, it would be really good to experiment with. I think that I'd love to, and I think that, as Carter said, I mean, Legacy of the Void does take a step in the right direction, but it's not really accomplishing that goal. And I think that changing the model to something like that, where the workers would react or act differently, would lead to a lot less maybe stalemates, and it would lead to like people splitting the map, and then you know, more holes for aggression and things. I think that theory is a really good theory, and I personally would like to see it put to use, but yeah, it's really hard to theory craft on that, really, for me.
I mean, when it comes down to it with StarCraft II, and RTS in general, it's all about where your incentives lie. Do you have incentives to be aggressive? Do you have incentives to expand? And at this point, in terms of Heart of the Swarm, you really don't have incentives to be taking anything but 3-base saturation. Even in Legacy of the Void, you don't really have a crazy amount of incentives to have like 5, 6, 7 bases. So if Blizzard wants to have a game where there are these small engagements all over the map, and they want all this multitasking to be shown, and if they want to change the economic model, it has to be at the point that players have incentives to be expanding rapidly and quickly and getting the benefits from doing that and taking those risks and spreading themselves out. Legacy of the Void doesn't do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is what they said. I think this is pretty unanimous with us that Legacy of the Void does promote faster expansions and less to critically play, but it does not give you an incentive to expand beyond, your base cap. Which, if that's what Blizzard wants, I guess that's what Blizzard wants, and it seems like that's what they want. But I don't know if that's what they want, because every single time they try our worker efficiency thing, they say something stupid like, what was it that they said last time that was a bit silly?
I believe White Wing actually has a pretty good quote. Hold on. He was talking about that. Give me a sec. He said that double harvesting was thrown out by Blizzard, not because it didn't work, but because it didn't do what Blizzard wanted.
Yeah.
Oof, such a big shot fired.
One of the things that Blizzard said was that it'll emphasize something about like you'll have less workers, so you could have bigger armies or something like that. I think they thought that was the goal. They said something about that in the last patch, which isn't correct. And they said something which Lelouch actually commented recently on. Was they said it would be easier to replenish workers, which is kind of true. Lelouch doesn't think that's true. And the reason Lelouch doesn't think that's true is because he said, I think what I said, which was that you would only see someone having a lot more bases versus a turtling player who is not harassing you anyways because he's turtling. So you wouldn't really see that scenario that much, except in a really large late game scenario. So I think Blizzard is just consistently missing the point, and I feel like they need to talk to someone like Lelouch and try to figure out exactly why we want this. Because there's only so much content they can read and so much of the QQ they can bury through to find what we want as a community. So I can understand their difficulty in understanding it, but it really, really sucks that they're having difficulty understanding it. Yeah. Or they're having difficulty explaining what they really mean to us, and they really do understand it, so I don't know, but...
Okay, so I am Caustic. This is a quote from him. In a 2-to-1 model, the emphasis of economic disruption is placed on destroying bases instead of killing workers. This is also partly perpetuated by the macro mechanics of the 3 races. I'm sure Blizzard has received plenty of feedback regarding Terrans losing their mineral lines but still having plenty of economy via huge mule drops. Still, between macro mechanics and mining efficiency, in many cases you're better off to destroy the town hall to slow down the opponent's economy for an extended period of time. This switches the gameplay narrative from multi-pronged harassments to one of big frontal assaults. Here's the question. Now that macro mechanics have been removed, what is the overall impact on the game from that perspective?
Better to kill workers in town halls. That's from what I noticed.
Well, I think it's more an incentive to kill workers, but if you're still going for the big frontal assault.
Yeah.
You can't win a game just by killing workers in Legacy of the Void. Like, you still have to have outright.
Is that a good thing?
Pushes.
I think that's a good thing. I don't think there should be a single defining...
Yeah.
Huh?
As long as there's a balance.
Yeah.
As long as there's balance between the two. It should never be, you can only win a game by winning a ginormous frontal push with the death ball. I think that being able to harass with small forces should have a huge impact on the game. Because the more of an impact those have, the more that we're heading towards our goal in Legacy of the Void, which is more spread out fights and whatnot.
And I think that goes into the comeback potential, where like he has a bigger army than you. His army is scarier than yours. You can't fight that army, but you can pull him apart, right? So being able to have like efficient ways of harassing that worker kills means something. Helps with that, like, okay, he has a better army than me, I need to do something to be able to win this game. Let's pull him apart and kill all his workers everywhere, so now he doesn't have an economy and I can trade inefficiently with his better army and then win, right? So it kind of helps with the comeback potential. But again, you don't want that to be like the win condition, right?
Yeah.
Where workers are so valuable is that if you kill like 8 of them in the beginning of the game, the personnel loses the game. That shouldn't be a win condition, because then you get things like Oracle openers being too strong and stupid. And you know, and then you have to base your build around that, because you don't want to just straight lose the game to that. But then he doesn't do it, and now you're behind. So there's a balance they need to find. But it should really be important that workers are definitely a big weakness that needs to be protected.
Telecom, would you rather have it be a balance, or do you like it being more so like Brood War? I'm just curious on your opinion.
I mean, I like the constant harassment and like the option of just picking your opponent apart, which is more so like Brood War, rather than just building up a giant army and then attacking, you know, mindlessly. I think is, you know, way too simple and easy for people to do, and that way you can really gauge the differences between the high-level players and the low-level players, pro gamers from amateurs, when they're able to do all these things, these, you know, multi-pronged harassments, you know. And I feel like definitely in Legacy of the Void the units have gotten a lot of changes as well, like the fluid, how fluid the units move. I feel like Mutalisks and Zerglings both move differently, so it actually helps with the harassment potential. And then also in terms of like whether you should kill the town hall or workers, I mean, I feel like it's definitely more of a trade-up now, or more of a toss-up now. In Legacy of the Void, you have more of a kind of a choice. It's more important to really choose whether you want to really try to snipe that town hall or snipe workers. I think definitely just, if you know, it's kind of, you just have to gauge the potential. I would say definitely workers more so than town halls at the moment, unless you have, you know, an obvious advantage.
Okay.
So.
StarCraft recently wrote that Legacy is a bit too hard, especially for lower level players. The TLDR of his post is, if pro players are banking money in the mid game and struggling to keep up, how can you expect a bronze not to bank? His fear is that the game being this hard will be left with nothing more than memories, and I'm very scared that's the road StarCraft is heading down. Yes, Riss?
I see this. I have a very emotional, like, strong attachment to this because I read this. The fact is, when you're bronze, you're playing another bronze player at equal disadvantage. Silver versus silver, equal disadvantage. So, like, no matter what league you're in, you're all at the equal disadvantage of the game, whatever it may be. Everyone's on equal playing footing. So, like, I don't think that that's a very. I disagree with StarCraft on that.
All right. Well, let me ask the entire question. But yeah, I hear you. How do you feel about this, which you just answered? And do you think removing the macro mechanics takes away some portion of this problem?
There's a problem.
Well, as far as
what he perceives as a problem, yeah.
Yeah.
One, I think bronze. Like, I don't think a bronze player cares if he's floating, or if a new player cares if he's floating, unless they're really, really motivated and getting better. And in that case, they don't care that they're floating. They're just scared that they maybe stop floating later, and they're going to work on that, right? So I don't think the difficulty of the game is something that'll stop people from playing. I think it's, you know, there's other factors that'll stop people from playing. But just because the game is hard doesn't mean that people aren't going to play it, right? Like, and people come into StarCraft knowing it's hard. Like, it's a thing of StarCraft. StarCraft's a hard game. If you don't want to play a hard game, you don't play StarCraft. And I don't think that should be a reason. Like, that may be a niche, but that should be a reason to make it easy, right? And that's my perspective. And sure, removing macro mechanics make it a little bit easier for Protoss and Terran. Make it, I would say, argue a lot easier for Zerg, because injects were a big thing to get into Zerg. You had to be good at them. You have to do it every X amount of seconds. I think it's like 40 seconds in Heart of Swarm. I don't know what it is in Legacy, because I think it's like 27 or something. But, you know, you have to do that every now and then, and that's just something hard for people to get into, and they're afraid to get into Zerg because of that. So I guess it kind of helps with people wanting to play Zerg. I don't know if it makes a difference for Protoss and Terran. Like, it obviously it's a little bit easier, but I don't think it, like, if what he sees as a problem is a problem, I don't think it solves it for anything but Zerg. And it doesn't even fully solve it for Zerg.
Alright. Okay, so, Telecom?
I think that, honestly, with the Legacy of the Void was so fast-paced before the macro change, or the last patch, the macro removal. I feel like it was extremely more fast-paced. that with the removal, that it definitely helps like slow down the pace of the game to the point where it'll be a lot more accessible for people like to just pick up and try to play. I think it definitely makes it a lot easier for people like lower level players worrying and stressed out about it. Yeah, I think it's definitely a big step in the right direction in terms of grasping a larger audience of people that maybe just even casual players.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
think
would argue that's like Archon mode and Allied Commanders as well.
Yeah.
That seems.
I remember someone. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so because taking map control and maintaining a similar base count is so important in Legacy of the Void, we see that a lot of strategies involving defensive play are quickly being phased out. How is this a good or bad thing in your perspective? And does defensive and turtley play deserve its place in StarCraft? Idra comes to mind.
I hate defensive and turtley play. It's really frustrating to play against. It feels significantly easier than it is to be an aggressive player. I will say it's easier to attack than to defend. That is true, and that is, though, minus the case of if the defending player is a turtley player, because the idea of being a turtley player is that you have less economy, but you're focusing on defense, and you have a smaller area to defend. It is not hard to defend on two bases, right? And that's really frustrating, attacking a turtling player. You can't pull them apart because there's not many places to pull them apart in. And so it's really frustrating. I don't like it. I don't think it belongs to StarCraft II. I think turtling, no matter what, will be viable in the lower leagues, because literally anything is viable in the lower leagues. So being a casual player, I don't think it affects them that much. But when it comes to competitive play, turtling is boring, action is fun. So I think anything that Blizzard could do to make turtling unviable is just wonderful. And as long as people are being active and showing off their APM and able to attack in multiple places in micro and still keep on top of their macro, I think that's just fantastic, as long as that specifically is being rewarded and not sitting on your base for like 3 hours.
Except anyone who's played Brood War, and I'm pretty sure Telecom would be, and probably Shaft, like some of the most legendary games out there.
3 hours long.
Terran holding on just by like a thread, turtling as hard as they can, and the other player trying to break them. So there is appeal.
Damn siege tanks.
Well, yeah, the difference between
But I think the situation has to be that the situation in StarCraft is much different than it was in Brood War.
Right,
Turtling in Brood War was excited because it was a spread out turtle.
Well, also,
StarCraft, you're defending just a few choke points, you know?
Yeah.
So.
There's a height advantage in Brood War that's not there in StarCraft.
I do disagree with the Brood War height advantage, though, because I don't want any RNG in my game, and that adds RNG in my game, and that just makes me uncomfortable. Like, there's one thing I wish they could remove from Brood War and find another way to get that defender's advantage. It's that. I really don't like RNG.
Define RNG for the audience.
Random number generator. So, because I think in Brood War, was it like a 50% chance to miss or something like that? You had a chance to miss if you're shooting up, right?
Right.
And I don't like that, because then you can't, like, no, I'm going to kill this thing in 3 hits. You're like, maybe I'll kill it in 6. Maybe I'll kill it in 8. So you're just kind of guessing, and I don't like that you have to guess like that. You already have it's a game of limited information, so you're already doing guesses. But they're educated guesses. You see 3 gases on a Zerg, and you see how long they've had them. You're like, these are the things they could feasibly do. You can make an accurate assumption. You see a unit on top of a cliff, and you're like, I'm not sure how many hits it's going to take to kill it. Right? You can't make a good mathematical assumption there, unless you're hacking or something. I don't know. But then that's not even that useful to you, so I don't even know why you would do that. But in Brood War, they just had a much stronger defender's advantage. So it was less that the turtley play was so strong, it's that you could actually hold a lot of stuff off and just make the game take a long time. And I do like really long games. I just like really long action-paced games, not really long Raven-based games.
PDD for days.
PDD!
Except not anymore, they nerfed the heck out of it. Now I feel bad. I feel bad.
I don't feel bad. No guilt. No feel bad.
The thing is, I think it was really sad because we as a community were like, wow, mech is too good. Instead of like Zerg players finding a solution, which if you look in Pro League, Zerg players are finding a solution to mech.
Yeah, but I think that's because PDD isn't as good.
They're forced to find a solution, and I think if we would have been stuck with Ravens for long enough, we would have found a solution.
Oh yeah, that's what Brood War did. They didn't patch anything, ever. Like, they had like 3 patches.
Except
it was pretty-
design-wise, people argued the Raven was flawed, so there's that.
Yeah.
There is that.
Anyways.
I think it is flawed.
Well, one thing as a Zerg player, like I disliked about mech was like, or the Raven specifically, is the counter to mech is tech switching as a Zerg player. You're going from huge ground-based armies to huge air-based armies, and the Raven neutralized both.
Mm-hmm.
That was my issue with it. That was my only issue with it. So, I don't know. We'll see how it plays out, though. I did like the Brood War method of, hey guys, this is the game, and y'all figure it out. I hope you like it. Like, that was the balance method. So
I think Blizzard should go into that method once they've fixed Legacy and got it where they want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Then just leave it, like leave the balance alone for a year or two, and just let people figure it out. Because people will figure out a way to deal with everything.
Mm-hmm.
They will. It's like it's impossible to perfectly balance things yourself. People will accidentally balance it. Map makers will balance it. Like with Brood War scenario, map makers did the balancing, right? StarCraft scenario, map makers and Blizzard do it. Like even before, I think like Blizzard only started being really active like 2 years ago with balance patching. I think with Wings of Liberty they were generally not ridiculously active with it. They didn't talk with the community much. They kind of let a lot of things figure themselves out, except with Broodlord. Even Broodlord and Fester, they're like, nah, wait till Heart of the Swarm. Wait till the next expansion. You're fine, right? And I like that approach. Like I think people often like Dota and League, Riot and Valve constantly like balance patch. I'm like, those are MOBAs. They have like 10,000 champions to deal with. That's a different game.
yeah,
Can't
it's
compare
an
it to
entirely
that.
different story.
This is different.
I mean, if you really think about it, though, Jungle Basin, Steps of War, Abyssal Caverns, Zelnaga Cavern, all those things, like, they all had the ability, like, the inability to take expansions as a
They were
fun-
horrific maps.
Yeah, exactly. But even when you work your way up to, like, Tal'Darim Altar, the bigger maps, the games were, I don't want to say terrible, but they weren't the Brood War map style games that we're used to. The space wasn't being utilized.
Whirlwind.
And
God bless that map.
Whirlwind was
Yes.
a great map. Bridgehead
Whirlwind
could be
was-
a great map if it was
Whirlwind
more
was the
spaced
only
out and there
big
weren't
map that I
back
felt like
rocks.
actually worked because mobility. Like I don't know. I thought Whirlwind was one of the few maps that was just huge that actually worked.
I want huge maps for StarCraft as long as that everyone is able to be equally mobile, right? Protoss currently has the issue of mobility. And I feel like we'll forever at this rate have the issue of some sort of mobility. The War Prism is definitely helping a lot with the buffs on it, but I really want these huge maps that are like Ruins of Saras. I would like it. I hate 4-player maps though. This is my problem with Ruins of Saras. It's a 4-player map.
RNG.
If it was somehow a 2-player map and that big, yeah, RNG. Again, I hate RNG in my games, but if it was especially PvP. But if it was a 2-player map, like I knew where they were going to spawn, it'd be a great map because you could have super long games, and if you had the ability of split map, like what Lalesh was saying about having the Double Harvester or Brood War Econ, you'd be able to have these super long split map games of constant expansions and constant fighting everywhere, trying to defend all these places because it's so big, where then you have, I forget what that map is called, the one with the in-base expansion in Legacy. Whatever that map is, you couldn't do it on there. There's like 1, 2, 3, there's like 5 expos you could take, maybe 6 that are feasible without stealing your opponent's expo. So like, you know, I don't like maps like that. Or Overgrowth. I mean, that was a fantastic map for Heart of the Swarm. I would hate it in what I want Legacy to be, because you have like 5 base, 6, 5, one of the 2 bases you could take, and then it's over. GG. Done. Game's over. You can't go beyond that. So,
Right. Oh, good job.
professional.
Yes. Okay. Any other comments from the panel regarding that? Okay. Some strategies focus on obtaining... By the way, we're at the last question and 2 sub-questions, so at the very end of the marathon. Some strategies focus on obtaining particular army compositions, upgrades, or other tech breakpoints in order to shift from the defensive role to the offensive role. Depending on the strategy chosen, defensive play can last a few minutes or most of the game. The half-patch approach limits the time a player can afford to be defensive while reaching a particular breakpoint. Exactly how much strategic diversity is lost by employing the half-patch approach?
I'm not sure about how much, but definitely the more annoying and bad half that I don't want in the game, definitely. Like the turtle until you have Sky Toss like until you have 200 carrier, I do not like. The turtle until you have 200 raving Viking, I don't like. The old turtle swarm host style, I did not like, which you can't really do anymore because swarm hosts are bad. But like I just don't like those kind of styles, and I feel like those are the only ones that are limited. It's just defending until you have this perfect army composition. I think you should be constantly harassing and fighting while accumulating that army composition at home if that's what you want to do. Like secretly be, or not necessarily secretly, but be making carriers while being active on the map and fighting. Defending with attacking is what I think, if you want to do that style, should do. And sure, it'll be harder. Sure, it'll take longer, but eventually, if the game's long enough, like a 3-hour Brood War game, you'll have a bunch of carriers eventually, right? So you can get to that strategy, you just can't do it defensively, and I think that's how it should be.
Rock?
Well, I think the argument is that the turtles. I think the turtle strategies that people quote unquote hate, the more the economic model supports expanding more, the less viable those are going to be. And
yeah.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because even though people may dislike them, they're still a strategy. They still exist, and people enjoy doing them. So, in terms of, like, you can't really go 2 or 3 base carrier in Legacy of the Void. Maybe you kind of can, but eventually you have to expand. And if you're the player playing against that, you can just expand rapidly and then defeat it. So I just think that there's definitely solutions to those strategies now. And we'll just have, I think more games need to be played. Honestly, Legacy of the Void is so far from being figured out until WCS is transitioned to Legacy of the Void that it's hard to tell how hurt certain strategies are. So.
Okay. Well, Zeromus, we started with him, we're going to end with him. He posed a very good question and a good concept in his treatise. The goal of Legacy of the Void should be to increase strategic diversity as a whole by adding more options while removing less. This is in stark contrast to FilterSC's suggestions that removes a large number of units from the game and tweaks others. Which of the two concepts do you find yourself agreeing with?
Telecom?
Could you repeat that one more time? I don't really understand the question very well.
You're fine. Okay, so Zeromus said, the goal of Legacy of the Void should be to increase strategic diversity by adding more options while removing less. He basically said that we want to add things, not take them away. Filter, in his post that we were talking about earlier, he wants to take like 4 or 5 units away from each race. And then he wants to change the units that are left over. He wants to change everything drastically. Rock could probably tell you more about the details of that if you need them. But which of the two concepts do you think is better, adding or subtraction?
I think definitely adding is better than subtracting, definitely. I mean, there's so many... I mean, you obviously don't want to go too overboard in terms of adding new units and new abilities, but I mean, adding or changing or excuse me, altering the units and the abilities that we have at the moment, I feel like would be the better choice rather than removing, several units. For example, removing the Adept and the Disruptor and replacing it with the, Dark Archon and the Reaver or something like that. I think
actually that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to replace the Disruptor with the Reaver. He wanted to take Infestors and Swarm Hosts out and replace them with better versions of Vipers and Lurkers and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think that probably just tweaking the numbers on the units and really just it's little by little is minuscule amount of change that you could possibly make, because we just literally changed the macro. Removing the macro mechanics was a huge, change, and then so I feel like we probably need to, like Torque said previously, they were gonna have to kind of take it little bit, step by step, and let Blizzard more so control the patching and whatnot.
Except this game is being released in 4 months.
Yeah.
I don't think Blizzard will release it if it's if they don't think it'll be good.
Well, I think Activision will.
Blizzard likes to delay things. Heroes took a while.
Yeah.
Like the other betas are definitely shorter.
Having a little volume issue,
Yeah,
but it's
sorry.
cool.
Fixed it. Yeah, so I think Blizzard will not release this game unless it's perfect. They even though they said it'll probably release this year, they did also say before March 2016. So I think if they have to leak into next year, they definitely will. They might even start WCS in beta. God knows what they'll do with that. But I doubt they'll release it if it's not in a good state, and I'm confident in Blizzard and their ability to balance the game. Because if you look at like a League of Legends, we're all like 50-50-50. Like, they know what they're doing. They're professionals at this. Design-wise, we may have issues with them, but if this game needs to be balanced, they will figure it out, and they will do it, and they'll do it as quickly, as faster than we could probably imagine. So I have faith in that. I will not be afraid of that. I'm only afraid of not getting to, like, the design space we want. And when it comes between Filter and I can't pronounce the other guy's name, I kind of in the middle. I don't want so many strategies that you can't scout them. Like, the current reason that Protoss feels gimmicky is that you have to memorize a bunch of different Stargate timings because you see a missing pylon. You're like, great, now there's a bunch of different times it could come depending on how close that Stargate is, and now I have to rush my Engie Bay at X amount of time. Right, and with removal of Chrono really fix that for the Protoss side, right? But I think when they're adding strategies, they can't add so many that you can't scout them and have like X amount of responses that are good, but not have so little strategies that the game is so stale and you just see the same thing over and over again, like HOTS PvT.
PvT is my favorite magic to watch, and I'm a Zerg player.
What?
Wow.
Do you like just seeing the same thing happen over and over again?
It's just like, it's absolutely awesome to watch. At least the high-level games, Maro versus someone like Rain.
Like Maro versus Parting is always fun
Defensive
to watch.
Mastermind versus Aggressive God, and just like, both constantly trying to find a weakness. And
What happens when an irresistible force meets an immovable object?
You're right, that Team Liquid thread was my favorite.
I wouldn't say that's Maro versus Parting, because I think Parting has beaten Maro a lot more times and vice versa.
So Maro versus Rain.
Maro versus Rain is more like that, yeah.
Okay. Well, guys, this kind of wraps up Legacy of Changes, this episode at least. I do want to thank you all for your time. Rock, Telecom, Torque. I want to give you guys a second to plug yourselves. Rock, I know you just started a daily recently. Would you like to tell people where they can find that?
Yeah, you can find, I'm starting a daily video with the help of our awesome host here. Here and there, he's helped me set up a lot of stuff. Absolutely great guy, by the way, Shaft is. Thank you for bringing us onto the show. But starting a daily, and you'll be able to find that on my YouTube channel that is linked below. So be sure to check that out. Hopefully I can help you out. My goal is to be able to help players out and just learn more about the game, in particular Zerg. So anyways, thank you.
Alright, and Telecom, any plugins?
Yeah, if you wanna follow me on Twitter, it's at IST_telecom, and I stream on Africa TV as well. It's Africa TV or Africa.tv/telecom.
Alright, and Torque?
Yeah, I tweet semi-regularly. If you want to see really salty Protoss tweets, you can follow at TorqueSC, so twitter.com/TorqueSC. And if you want to see me, the King of Salt, ever stream, I stream at twitch.tv/TorqueSC. And there's even further salt there.
Alright, man. Nothing quite tastes like Protoss tears. Well, guys, you have a great evening. Thank you so much for your time. And viewers, audience, I hope you guys like it. Let us know this is the pilot episode. Help share this with your friends. Get the word out there, because hopefully we can get some of those bigger name players that said, hey, I want to see how this show turns out before I sign up. But we've got quite a few big names if you guys do help us get the word out there and make it worth their while. So thanks so much. You can follow me at The Only Shaft, and please join in the discussion at #ClanEat. We will be reading those comments and questions to pull into our next episode. Thank you so much, guys. It has been my pleasure. Good night.
Thanks.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like this content, and clearly you do, you made it this far after all, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much, and have a great day.